Hello, everyone. My name is Peter, and this is The Burning Question. I'd like to welcome to the show today Matt Martin. He is the co-founder and vice president at Carbon Earth. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on today. I really do.
Got excited about your product. We got chatting online a little bit, but for the people that don't know Carbon Earth, why don't you run down what the company is, what you guys do, and where you're located?
Sure. Yeah. So we are a startup out of Knoxville, Tennessee. As a company, really, at the end of the day, we're a manufacturing company that specializes in agitation agglomeration. Beyond that, our technology that we primarily use is using organic matter that's been co-composted with biochar as a fertilizer base. So we manufacture a specific line of products with exactly that base and use to deliver to our customers, which is primarily the lawn care market, the turf and ornamental market, a way to not only supply the agronomic requirements of the plant, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but also a soil amending ingredient, something that can physically affect the structure or tilt of the soil, and also have a direct and positive impact on the root system of the plant as well.
Yeah. And how did you get into this? In a previous conversation, you referred to yourself as a lawn jockey, which I thought, as someone who's not in the business, I thought that was both fun. And I was like, okay, well, so I want to know about that.
Yeah, so it was, I studied turfgrass management in college, and this is 2008, and when the economy tanked, I couldn't find a job doing anything. So True Green was hiring at the time, and we gingerly called that fert and squirt because you're spraying and spreading fertilizer all over the place. And I fell in love with that kind of business model because it was so interactive. One, you could see the results of what you were doing relatively quickly, and the more work you put in, obviously, the bigger the result you got, and also the customer interaction as well. I was exposed to such a diverse group of people from all walks of life, all socioeconomic statuses, and all united by the quest for having a beautiful lawn. And that piece really appealed to me. And
the thing that brings us all together, right?
Yeah, right. And so I totally fell in love with it. And what I noticed as I went further into my career, I went to work at different companies, and I had some unique opportunities to kind of tour the South and work in different markets. And with that, I started to notice a couple of holes in the industry that existed, and it became my point from that point forward was to take everything I had learned through my career journey up to that point and make it more rewarding for, one, the applicator, and two, also provide some greater legitimacy to the industry in general from the ability to provide a better environmental impact than what we were currently doing. It was just so obvious that there were slight changes that we could make that would be so much better for everybody involved, not just the consumer, but also safer for the applicator, and then total big picture is safer for the entirety of the environment.
Mm-hmm. So when I hear part of your story, obviously the lawn market, right, is not a particularly, like, the way it's cast in the climate community is like, do away with your lawns, plant native grasses, all those kinds of things, right? And as you're talking through this, I'm kind of going like, okay, so what was the market like? What was the environmental impact of what was happening? And then what is your product, and how is it different?
Yeah, so it's kind of the same thing you see in conventional agriculture. I call the lawn care community the dirty stepchild of agriculture because it's many of the same pieces you see take place in agriculture we apply those same techniques and principles to lawn care as well, right?
Mhm.
And where they sometimes you'll see big strip till operations or big heavy tillage taking place. Well, we come in and we plug a whole bunch of holes in the ground and
Mhm.
apply a new seed, and then you establish your new seed from ripping up your soil and and with that and your fertility that goes along with it, everything was from conventional source. There was no sustainability. There was no circular economy within that industry. And so a lot of times what you would see too would come from a place of ignorance where you show up to a property and where you just don't know how to handle the problem at hand. And so your answer to it may be fertility, when in actuality, fertility was maybe one of the worst things you could do from an environmental impact. So the idea was, how do we develop a product that if a mistake is made using the product, that we make sure we're not doing anything that is going to contribute towards having a negative impact on the environment. So part of it is a piece of it is education, right? And being in front of our now customers and in teaching them just sound agronomics, right? So when to make certain judgment calls, what those judgment calls look like in variable situations. And then the second piece of it is that when they make that determination, that firm idea that, okay, fertility is the right answer, that they can go reach in their toolbox and pull out a tool that is going to have a positive impact, whatever the case may be. And we saw the big opening there was being able to use something that is safe in the sense that you're not going to get just a big flush of release and everything just immediately available all at one time that would have greater potential for runoff if there's not a good stand of turf density, and also something that would hold on to nutrients better to slow the rate of runoff if there was a big rain event or even flood-like conditions. So I can't remember the second part of your question, but that was
Yeah. Well,
the first part of it.
I mean, it gets to kind of what your product is. So you said that it's basically, am I getting it right? In that it's roughly speaking some combination of biochar and fertilizer. Can you break that down a little bit? Talk about maybe whatever is innovative about your product.
Yeah. So this is, and it's kind of a long story how we ended up getting here. At first thought, we wanted to use, and I was approached by a renewable energy company about using biochar in turf grass. So we started conducting tests. It started with trees, right, where we were establishing tulip poplars because they grow really fast. And what we noticed by using biochar was we were actually creating more problems than we were actually solving problems. And through a series of very expensive testing, we were able to figure out that the problems we were eliciting by using biochar was actually due to the absorptive capacity of that biochar. It could just hold on to things, so much of things, and hold on to it for a really long time, very strongly. So the idea was to figure out, especially for turf grass, when control over release is everything. That is the name of the game when you're managing turf.
When you're talking about the things that it would hold on to and the things that are released, you're talking about nutrients, right? You're talking roughly NPK, is that right?
Yes, NPK and all your minors. I mean, it just absolutely would bond up to it really well. So, when you would test the biochar itself after the fact, you'd be like, wow, this thing is loaded with nutrients. This is exactly what you want. This is perfect. But the problem is that you couldn't get it to release from the char itself. So kind of a stroke of luck. I mean, just total guesswork. My business partner now started providing biochar to poultry farmers in Middle America, and then those poultry farmers were one of them that we were actually teamed up with at the time was converting it into compost and was raving about that product. And so my business partner took some of that material. We tested it to see what the nutrient analysis was, and it was a beautiful nutrient analysis, contained any and everything above and beyond what we'd ever want out of a turf grass fertilizer. So then ultimately it was applying it and watching what happens. And we were blown away with the results of what was happening when we were applying this product. So that became the foundation and the basis for everything that we were doing was taking a biochar, in particularly during our research phase, what we figured out was we wanted a very specific temperature biochar and we wanted a very specific feedstock because we wanted to capture both anions and cations. So you can manipulate the ability to target that based on your process temperature and of course your feedstock. So that became the foundation. We took, a hardwood biochar that was pyrolyzed at a what would be considered a moderate temperature. We like to keep things between 600 and 700 C. And then we put that into the poultry houses that act as bedding material for the birds. And then it goes through a natural composting process, which ultimately allows that biochar to have a much more free exchange of those nutrients that are absorbed due to the co-composting process that takes place.
Mm-hmm. So is this, relative to the rest of the market, is this a new thing for the turfgrass industry, for the fertilizer industry? I don't know a ton about fertilizer generally. So are other people doing this? Are you guys, is it cutting edge? Like, where does this fit in?
Yeah, so right now we are the only company in America that produces a biochar-based fertilizer, a biochar compost-based fertilizer.
Yeah, and I know there are lots of people that do compost, but this is the difference between a compost and a fertilizer is like you said you do agglomeration. I guess that is some sort of process that allows you to use it in a turfgrass environment. Is that right?
Yeah, so basically agglomeration just meaning that we form it into a granule that looks just like any other store-bought fertilizer.
Got it.
So that way, when it lands in the applicator's hands, they can use all the equipment they normally have. There's no requirement for specialty equipment. They don't have to dedicate a special truck just to haul around the material in a raw form. It's all in a absolutely exactly the way they're used to seeing it is the way it arrives, and all they have to do is go apply it.
That's great. So can you give, for me and for everyone else not familiar with the turfgrass industry, and also perhaps your show, you have a radio show and hence the amazing setup that I'm looking at right now. What is it called? You can plug your show.
Yeah, so
I don't know what the overlap between the biochar community is and the turfgrass community is, but it sounds like it probably needs some weaving together. So maybe.
Yeah, so I host a show on Turfs Up Radio, turfsupradio.com. I do the drive home from 4 to 6 p.m. every day. And also I do the same thing on YouTube as well as The Grass Factor. Nice.
Okay. So how big is this industry? And, you guys are in Knoxville, Tennessee. Like how far afield are you? Is this a local company, a regional company, a national company?
Yeah, so we're definitely a national company. We service regularly 42 states across America. And even though we do primarily, 99% of our manufacturing right there in Calhoun, Kentucky, which is where we do our manufacturing, we ship material just about everywhere. So, in terms of finished goods, we're moving thousands and thousands of tons of fertilizer a year. And in terms of biochar alone, we're purchasing thousands of tons, much lower percentage, but still thousands of tons of biochar every year too.
Are you able to purchase that relatively nearby? I mean,
yes.
Okay,
so
great.
But the way we've kind of worked it out, and again, we have investors, and our investors come from the renewable energy sector. They're actually the true manufacturers of the biochar, and we just serve as really an offtake agreement for them. They're relatively close to where we are right here in Knoxville. So it just made sense for us because we would have more control over our pyrolysis temperature, more control over our feedstock to make sure that we were able to capture the characteristics that we were looking for.
That's great. So in terms of, there's a lot of graphs of, how to do biochar, how to make it work involves like these big circles with tons of different people interacting. And that always scares me from an entrepreneurial perspective because I'm like, this seems like a lot to coordinate. And then also seems really appealing to me from like a community member and taking care of the planet perspective. It's like we actually do need everyone to get on board here. And so I'm curious, could you lay out like the flow for us? Feels like there's biochar coming from a biomass power plant or something akin to that. And then maybe, can you break down the value chain for the poultry farmers, for you guys, lawn care guys, maybe the power plant? I don't know if I'm getting all the pieces right, but.
Yeah, so it starts real simple. We try and capitalize on as many waste streams as possible.
Yeah.
Originally, all of our biomass is sourced as a waste stream from a lot of times it comes from furniture production because hardwood is oftentimes used in especially for furniture shops. So we'll take all of that waste wood. We also have a couple other contracts with different mills and stuff. And we'll take that material in that goes through the different processes of biochar production where, they've got to dry it and put it through a chipper and get it to a consistent particle size, pyrolyze it. And then what we do is we reach out to poultry farmers and show that with the current poultry farmers we work with, they will see, reduced mortality rate in the birds, improved pad quality, reduced ammonia levels in the houses, and have actual farmers that they can talk with about their experience of working with us and us being able to supply it and what to expect from the quality of the bird perspective. And then also we pay a premium for it, right? So it's
you pay a premium for what?
The finished product, the finished litter at the end.
Got it.
In terms of biochar, to put kind of a range on that, depending on, where the feedstock is coming from, finished product, we may be paying anywhere from $200 a ton up to, $400 a ton, somewhere in there. And then, when we approach the farmer, we actually give them the biochar at no cost, and then agree to buy it back on the back end. Now, it increases the cost of our final product, but when you're working with we're not really known. We're just a couple of rednecks from Tennessee who are just kind of chasing down a dream, right? So who's a poultry farmer to listen to some young kid? And so there. The whole starting piece of it there was, how do you get in the door? That was a big issue there, and trying to find the right farmer who's willing to take that risk was very difficult. But once we did, things started to kind of catapult, and we found it was just easiest. It was easiest and as seamless as possible if we could just provide them the biochar, and then at that point, we would establish a contract to buy it back on the back end. So. It turns out to be a win-win for the farmer, right? Because they get to capitalize on the performance of the bird, and then at the end of it, they also get paid for their waste stream as well. Yeah. Then, as we take that material and put it into the turf and ornamental market, even though the manufacturing process is a little bit different than what we're accustomed to with conventional fertilizer manufacturing, it's not as energy intensive, and the raw material expenditures, we don't have the requirement of taking natural gas and converting that into a solid, pure nitrogen source. That's a very intensive process. We're not doing that. So we're actually able to make up a lot of money on the back end of that because we're skipping out on all those steps. So even though we may be a little higher up on the front end, our cost to manufacture isn't as great as a Haber-Bosch method, and thus we're able to compete in the marketplace.
That's fascinating because the birds are effectively doing this process for you.
Exactly. The heavy lifting, the birds are doing the process.
Yeah, well, right. I feel like there's a lot of things that I feel like chickens are taking on, making eggs, making food. They're doing a lot of work there.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so obviously it seems like at least from what you've mentioned to me, seems like an appealing product for what did you call them? The applicators, is that right?
Yeah, the
That's like a
applicators.
person driving, like cutting turf grass and taking care of turf grass. Is that like a that's the right group of people?
Kinda, yeah. So believe it
Yeah.
or not, and this is how when I say this industry is not very well known, but it's actually has a gigantic economic impact. Is there are lots of companies that the only thing they do is they've got a truck and they carry around bags of fertilizer in the back of their truck and a spreader, and they go from property to property and literally apply just fertilizer to people's lawns. That's the entirety of their business. That's all they do.
Wow. And this is usually private lawns, or it's also like golf courses and public parks and things like that?
Primarily, it's private lawns. Now, you will see bleed over where some of those companies will take on, a local municipality or a local school. Like I used to donate my time to one of the local high schools up the road. One, because it was I got free tickets to go to the games, and two, there's kind of the self-serving, self-satisfaction piece of it of watching something you grew support. Something as fun as watching these kids get out there and just absolutely have the time of their life. It's just a neat thing. So I made sure that the one closest to my house, I always, I'd never charge them to do it. So I just go out there and hang out with them and make the grass as pretty as possible.
Well, and catch your game. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, so I feel like I understand the pieces of the market. Like, are you guys growing? If so, like how much are you growing? It feels like, I don't know, it feels like lawn care is probably a massive market. I really have no idea. Like, where are you guys in this entrepreneurial journey? It sounds like you guys, I don't actually know, when was the founding of Carbon Earth, and like, where are you guys going?
Yeah, so we formed the LLC in June of 2018. We started construction where literally from the ground, we cleared off acreage starting in early September of 2018. We poured our first piece of concrete October of 2018. We produced our first bag of fertilizer March of 2019. We actually built the plant in 6 months. It was unbelievable how all that came together. I mean, that was the entire community of Calhoun coming together to help us launch this project. And that was just a beautiful thing to watch happen. So from there until now is it really since March of 2019 to now is how long we've been operating. And year over year growth is it's an insane number. We're up over 600%. And at this point, we can't even keep up with everything we had. So we are actively looking for investment into our manufacturing process, and we're also actively investing ourselves into the manufacturing process to continue to expand our manufacturing capacity. To kind of put it into perspective, right now we're shipping roughly 2 tractor trailer loads of fertilizer a day to various places throughout the United States. And we're hoping to at least triple that by spring of next year.
Nice. That's great. That's wonderful to hear. So then, I guess, I don't have any more questions. If there's anything you feel like I left out, jump in. But I think the one of the things I always want to make sure we do is, I feel like specifically the biochar and the people that are focused in biochar is climate change kind of community. There's a really tight knit group of people, and feels like there's a real strong community around helping everyone work together. So what are pieces that you need over the course of the next year that if someone knew about or had expertise in or was willing to connect you to, that you would be interested in chatting with people about? Are there any there?
Yeah, anybody who's seasoned in the fertilizer industry as a whole, because that's not my background, would always be great to talk to if they have experience in scaling businesses in the fertilizer industry. But also, at least from the climate perspective too, because one of the odd things is that originally when I got into this, I had no idea of really the climate benefits of using biochar. My big thing was, I knew it from an organic matter perspective. I wasn't really sure what to expect from the biochar perspective, but I learned how big of a tool it could be in terms of making a better fertilizer. So learning this piece on kind of the back end was a secondary thing for me, and it's incredible, and it's really cool to see, and we wholly support it. So I love watching. I just encourage anybody out there that is doing research on this and can put data in front of us. Just understand that we'll be as big of an advocate for it as you possibly could be too, because ultimately it's our livelihood as well. And we all have kids, and we employ 20 people in Kentucky, and between their kids, it's. We're talking about almost 100 lives here at stake, and if we can leave a lasting impression on them and for their future generations too, we want to do that.
Yeah, that's great, and I'm excited about what you guys are doing. It's exciting to meet people who are using biochar without a kind of philosophical dedication to it. There's just a lot of kind of without an ideology that's like, okay, we're going to save the planet. It's nice to meet people that are like, hey, we're using it because it's the best available product. I think that's going to be a key piece to kind of drive the adoption and usage of biochar. And then also, using it at the scale you're using, you're working with, actually starts to get to a place in which it's like, okay, this might actually make a dent. I think we talked about this a while ago, but I think there's an important piece of what you're doing, which is using an innovative and climate positive solution that is in fact better than the alternative, or at least competitive with what's out there, to kind of push the market forward. So what I'm really hoping is that you guys blow up, and that biochar in fertilizer becomes something that you can get not just for your lawn but for your garden, and eventually, with some luck, if you could push that back into row cropping and some of the larger ag community, that would be a huge benefit and would open up both the market for biochar, but also the sequestration of carbon in soils to so many more people, and at such a broad level. So I'm super excited about what you guys are doing, and look forward to continuing to hear about you and share your stories as you guys grow. So thanks so much for coming on the show, Matt. A pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter.
All right, take care.
See ya.